Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order for the Maple Run Unified School District Board of Directors meeting. It's November 17th. The time is 6:02 p.m. First item on the agenda is the agenda review. I do have a couple of things that I need to add. Under item 7, we need to add an item 7C, negotiations. And then under 8, we need to add 2 items. One of them is item 8B. It's the leave request from Molly Hartman. And item 8C, which is the governance subcommittee report. Can I please have a motion to accept the revised agenda?
So moved.
Thanks, Al. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Jack. All right, I've got to take a roll vote here. Jack?
Yes.
Al?
Yes.
Nina?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Joanna? Grant?
Yes.
Alicia?
Yes.
Peter?
Yes.
Katie? Did you say yes, Katie? I can't see Katie anymore. Katie, did you say yes? Well, we won't count Katie for now. We'll count Nilda. We have a majority of 8 votes, right? All right, moving on. Please stand and join me for a pledge of allegiance to the flag. All right.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, and indivisible,
under God,
justice for all.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is the visitor section. There's a public comment visitor section of the meeting is an opportunity for community members to address issues of concern about policy, budget, and administrative matters, or to share ideas about how we can work together to improve our schools. We value input and respect divergent views. We ask you to limit your remarks to time constraints prescribed by the chair, which will be 2 minutes, and refrain from airing grievances with individual members of the school community, including respecting the privacy of the students and parents. Those attending remotely that wish to speak may type their full name in the comment section. And during the meeting, the comments will be disabled. If you're going to speak, please state your name and your city and town of residence before you speak. Do we have anyone that wishes to speak, John?
We have one so far, Ryer Erickson.
Okay. My timer. Ryer, if you would like to speak.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. So I want to make something clear, that something that this district has said is that equity is about advocating for those who can't advocate for themselves. And that's not really an actuality. It's about realizing that power structures have ignored the advocating people have done. I have concerns when the work of equity is framed in white savior rhetoric like that. Now, we have cultural habits of applying a sense of urgency to our everyday lives in ways that perpetuate power imbalance while disconnecting us from our need to breathe and pause and reflect. And that irony is that this imposed sense of urgency serves to erase the actual urgency of tackling racial and social injustice. Racial justice is urgent, but when urgency, when referred to as a part of white supremacist culture, as was done at a prior meeting, is about centering this work around white people, centering victories on white people, centering knowledge on white people. So when the district decided to end the equity committee, as it was then operated, operating, it silenced BIPOC voices. And that was done out of urgency, seemingly, which is in every single way white supremacy. So when you have so social emotional learning, learning work is important, but that work doesn't always align with the work of equity and can, when the wrong people are doing it, lead to greater harm. So I would like to see the district engage with voices of color, have an impartial person who's working with the district of color. I would also like to see a commitment to belonging, equity, and inclusion work as a way to center the needs of historically marginalized voices. This includes BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, people with disabilities, et cetera. And I would like to see a system created that includes protections and accountability that are transparent. I shouldn't have to schedule a meeting with the superintendent to understand the work the district is doing that will directly and personally affect my children. This isn't that much to ask for, and while the majority of school districts in Vermont and the US are increasing their community engagement in issues of equity, inclusion, and belonging, this district has seemingly scrapped that work and continues to say they're going to set it up at some point in the future. But shutting out voices of color and community members whose lived experiences better serve to guide this work isn't good practice. And this is centering white people in every way and erasing non-white global majority people. And that feels to me a whole lot like white supremacy. So I just ask you as a school board and the superintendent to do a better job of engaging people of color, BIPOC, LGBTQIA+, people with disabilities, and other historically marginalized communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryer. Does anyone else wish to speak?
That's it. Nobody else in the chat, Nilda.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're gonna move on the agenda then. The next item is the consent agenda. There are two items on there. Well, there are two topics, 3 items, the November 3rd minutes, the November 15th minutes, and the media packet. Does anyone need to pull anything out for discussion? Hearing none, we'll accept the consent agenda as submitted. Next item is item 6, reports to the board. We have a district liaison report in our packet as attachment 6A, and I believe Bill is going to speak to it.
Yeah, I wish we had more data than we get, as I said in my report. I know this report isn't sufficient. After this report runs from August 22nd, I believe, but it has the months of August, September, and October. The work of the SRO up till September 30th, and then we switch the contract to the district liaison on the 1st. It gives you a summary of types of instances that have been responded to by either the SRO at the time or the district liaison officer. At the same time, gives you some definitions for those types. This is the data that the St. Albans police had on hand. Since the switch to district liaison, we've been working at, we had a subcommittee, the leadership team worked together to analyze the MOU and what data we need to collect. As you'll see in the summary memo at the top, we're on the first page, we're currently getting our Power School student information system to track these instances. Sometimes instances are not directly related to the student, so we figured out how to do that as well. And I will be expanding this report, and I gave you the types of fields and data we'll be tracking, so in March you can see questions we can query at that point. So that's really kind of a 2-minute summary of where we're at. I'm not sure if there are questions from the board. It is the information that we had at the time of this report.
Anyone have any questions for Bill? Hearing none.
I do.
Sorry. All right, Susan has, I think, was up first.
Sure.
So, Bill, these are examples, but not necessarily things that have happened since the start of the school year.
No, on the third page is the actual data of what's happened since the start of the school year.
Okay.
The second page was the definitions of each of those categories on that page, and the first page is how we will be improving the system for the March report, but we weren't collecting that data, so I couldn't report on it prior to the MOU approval.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Joanna and then Alicia.
Thanks. I have 2 questions, Bill. One is, are you currently satisfied, or is the leadership team currently satisfied with the definition of juvenile problems?
Had to be vague to protect the privacy of the students on that one. Sorry, there are some places with both FERPA protections and protections for students under the law, under criminal law, that we have to be vague on that one.
Okay, I guess what my concern with that is, you know, I feel like we're still in the process of figuring out what is appropriate for an SRO officer to deal with versus what's appropriate for a mental health person, clinician, interventionist to deal with. And so I am, not that I'm looking for an answer, but I am curious, or I wonder about how it's decided as to when an SRO is enacted into addressing those situations, and is it appropriate, or should it be done, or could it be done by a mental health provider?
Yeah, I don't have, until we went through a case by case, but I've got to do that under protections, and I have to protect the kids.
I'm not asking you to, you know, go against any kind of order. I'm just saying to you that part of what we did here, right, was to reduce issues, reduce the wrong person attending to a situation. And so my question is, how do we know going further whether or not the appropriate person is addressing the situation at hand?
And I think you're pointing out a piece that is a gray area that is hard to do that in a data collection piece. That's one of the pieces. There's a place where numbers break down, and you're starting to point to that. I understand your question about what you're trying to be transparent as a board, and this is where we're rubbing up against those protections. Especially with the numbers that you see here, they're single-digit numbers in a public.
I understand that for sure. So what is the plan in place to ensure that the right person is addressing these issues?
The leadership team has heard fully about the mental health and having mental health certified people work with students when needed. And I can tell you that the whole team has heard that very directly from our discussions in our leadership team about it being very appropriate. If anything, I think they're being extremely judicial about when they engage the district liaison.
All right, thank you.
You get both your questions, Joanna?
I think so.
All right, thanks. Alicia?
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
My question is kind of following up to Joanna's, in that when I look at this report and I see the embedded NCSS crisis worker was utilized to assist school staff, that portion. And I just wonder, what role does the district liaison officer have in that space? And is NCSS or another mental health professional consulted before the district liaison officer is involved?
Yes. On staff, people are consulted.
Okay, thank you.
Nilda,
Yes.
could I have a question or make a comment? I understand my previous 2 board members, their concerns. I'm greatly concerned with the fact that we do not have SROs in the building, yet we've had, in October alone, we had 3 weapons offense, which is possession of a deadly weapon. I'm tremendously concerned about that. And I guess I'm not, there's not a question, so I'm not looking for an answer, but just to express that this board voted to remove SROs, and yet we've had, in 1 month, we've had 3 weapons offenses in our district.
Thank you.
Can I ask another question?
Yep.
I guess for me, in follow-up to Peter's question, it would be interesting to know, how is this different from last year and the year before? In terms of comparing if there is any difference.
It's hard to compare because the way we're tracking data, even at the beginning of this year, knowing the discussions we were having, we really increased the tracking of the data of instances of engagement of SRO at the time up to September, and since then with the district liaison officer.
Oh, could you repeat that one more time? Because I had a hard time hearing it.
Yeah, just hang on. Can you hold on just one sec? Bill, you're a little bit garbled, and I don't know what's going on. It's almost like you're echoing or something.
Well, I took my mask down, which is probably better now. Is that better?
That is a little better.
Yeah.
Well, I've mixed emotions about it, but
so do I. What I can say is, Susan, it would be hard to compare last year's data or any other year's data to the current data that we're collecting now, because knowing what we knew in the summer, we worked with the St. Albans Police to increase the data collection and what was being tracked. So it's a different collection system even before we moved to the district liaison officer, because how we're tracking the work of the then SROs and now district liaison. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but I guess I'm curious that we wouldn't have, because weapon charges or weapons in the school seems serious. It just seems, I guess, interesting to me that we wouldn't have that information, or that the St. Albans Police Department couldn't get that information.
So for weapons violations, something like that, that's required to report to the state, that we could probably go back and look. We'd have to do some work to see where that data is. Personally, I don't know where it is, but we'd have to go find it.
Okay.
Joanna, go ahead.
I just had to unmute. I guess my other question is around the substance abuse. So I just want to make sure that I'm stating this properly. It said that there were 3 alcohol offenses. And it said here, a student under the influence drinking alcohol in school. Can you talk to us about what the difference is going to be, or how an SRO is being utilized in substance abuse policy violations? I understand, or my understanding is that they typically get involved with sale or distribution in a school, but not in possession or intoxication, that is handled with another process and often, goes restorative.
Yeah, I would have to look into these cases, Joanna. I haven't looked into those. I know that typically, in general, I can't speak to any of the 3, that we do a restorative medical approach. But when there is something with substance abuse or possession, something with possession or sale, definitely with distribution, the officers are involved. But I know from my experience of working in the schools that in general, because I don't know these 3 cases, usually it's also taking the paraphernalia that's been confiscated at the time, and the police have that role as well. So I don't know if that's the case for these or not. I know that at my time, either here in this district or in other districts, when I've been filling as a principal or working in the school, it was usually taking the confiscated alcohol or drugs.
Okay.
So Bill, what I'm hearing is for the future, perhaps these reports that involve weapons or drugs could have a little more information, bearing in mind that you have to protect the identity of the person. But my recollection, I was trying to look at the report to see if it defined what the weapons were, but my recollection from old days of school board stuff is that a weapon can be anything that somebody decides to use as a weapon, not necessarily what we define as weapons. And I don't know if that's the case here or not. So it might be worth having that information. I mean, if somebody uses a nail clipper as a weapon because they want to hurt someone with it, that's a lot different than someone carrying a handgun into the school.
Yeah, I'm not
Joanna? Did you say something, Bill?
I was gonna say, I'm not sure that that's the case with these 3 weapons violations. They get reported to me and I know what they are. And again, I've got to protect the students, but I know that that was not the case in what you're referencing.
Okay,
Joanna?
Just one last one, just looking for a little bit more clarification around events as well, because that seems to be the majority of the use of the SROs. So are they working like an 8-hour day and then also working 2 or 3 or 4 hours later on in the evening to do special events as well?
Yes, those are safety, or they may adjust their schedule, Joanna, as being a district liaison officer or an SRO, they may adjust their schedule, but those are events where they provide safety pieces, i.e. a football game, other gatherings.
Okay. So they're not there during the school day. They're there for the football game instead.
I can't say that definite. I can say that they may be. I can't say that definite. I'd have to go back and look at those individual days. I don't track their hours, that piece. I know we have supports during the day, every school day. So.
okay.
I just think that that's might be something, to look at, because if they are not working during the school day because they're covering events after school and in the evening, and it's happening 37 times in a month, I would be really interested to see what their hours are, because if we have been able to run the schools without them because they're handling events in the afternoon, I would be interested to hear those hours.
Once again,
37 days, it's not once,
the 37 events,
Yeah,
not necessarily days.
thank you.
Anyone else with questions about the report?
Well, clarification for me.
Sure.
With all the discussion of the SROs, I thought we made a change. And that we don't have an in-house SRO, we have a liaison.
That's correct.
Then why are we referring it to SROs?
They were SROs until September 30th, and then after September 30th, went into becoming a district liaison on October 1st. You'll see that on page 3, where you see in October we changed to DLO, and before that it was SRO.
Are these offensive from the first day of school or from the first day of October?
This is, you'll see under each month there, Al, it starts from the first day of school into August, and then September, and then October.
So it's
Thank you.
overlapping both processes, Al.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right.
I have a quick question or comment.
Yes, Grant.
First off, Bill, thanks for providing the report. I think that, it gives us a good starting point. And just hopefully this is helpful. I think what's missing is the context. I think this goes back to maybe some of the other comments from the board. And maybe it might be good to add in future iterations of this, but the justifications for the metrics that we're tracking and why they're included in this program. And then the historical context, because we haven't given you that, right? We haven't really defined what might be seen as good or bad. And so we're looking at this, trying to decide that on our own as we see it. And so we don't have the historical context to go back to. And I know that both of those would have been big asks for this report. But maybe like I said, in future versions or in future reports, maybe not exactly this one, but that might be the kind of information that would be useful for us.
I would say that this is our baseline grant. We won't have comparative back unless it was a major offense that we had to report to AOE, which there's only a few of these categories that do that.
Thank you.
Right. We ready to move on? Under old business, item 7B, implicit bias and anti-racism training. Bill?
Yeah, the COVID update. Sorry, I know that I had a hard time hearing you there for a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. I screwed up too. So 7A, COVID update. Thank you.
Yeah. So at the last board meeting, it was asked about test to stay to be equitable, and I wanted to give some statistics and let you know what we're doing as a district to ensure that we can get as many kids back into school with test to stay as possible. Couple things I'd like to let you know about test to stay, and then I'll talk about some other things with COVID as well. So when we first started test to stay, we had a participation rate of 25 to 35%. In the last 5 days, we've averaged 80%, with 2 of the days being 100%. We've been calling families, students that have been deemed a close contact but haven't been able to come to test to stay to see what they needed to be able to participate so we could get their kids back into school. I'm not going to list all of those because I think some of that could give personally identifiable information away to the families, and I don't want to do that because it's pretty well known in our community who's a close contact and who's in quarantine, and I don't think that that's fair. But some of the global reasons that we're hearing for not participating is too early in the morning, rather take the child to school late. Just doesn't work with the family schedule. Concern over the tests aren't accurate. The student had symptoms and they didn't understand the process. Just in the past 3 days of calling, I want to thank Erin Rushlow out of our office. She's been doing that. She said we've increased it pretty fast in just answering questions to parents that weren't clear, even though it was written up and documentation was sent home. So, we're willing to help families what is needed to make that happen. And so now that we've got, as I told you before, the goal was to get to good and then get to great. So I think we got to good. And to me, that was that 75% number. And now we're getting to the great. And that's always usually individual pieces with parents and families. The other thing I'd like you to know that in the past week, we've had 5 additional COVID cases, which is actually down from the prior weeks. But at the same time, SATEC is in the top 10 schools with the most cases in the state of Vermont. So SATEC is really challenged by the number of kids and families that they're responding to with COVID cases, as well as our other schools are too. But I just wanted to point out and say they've been really working hard with a lot of cases over there, and doing a great deal of work. So that's really my COVID update. I'd be glad to take any questions, Nilda, from the board, but that's where we're at today.
Anybody have any questions for Bill? Joanna?
Bill, have you been able to determine whether or not it's still community transmission or school transmission, or have you seen a change over time?
We have both going on.
Both, okay.
Thank you. Anyone else have questions related to COVID update? Okay, moving on to item 7B, implicit bias and anti-racism training. Bill?
Yeah, I was hoping we could have a follow-up discussion. I know it was almost 2 weeks ago from Dr. Brown's presentation through VSBA, but many of us were there. And Nilda, I was thinking at first of just asking takeaways from people from what I saw a couple comments from our board members during it. We couldn't see the participants the way they had Zoom set up because I'm sure there were so many people on that you couldn't do that. But I just I thought maybe Nilda, we could do a round robin of takeaways from his book of culture, Leading with a Culture of Love, and his work on being culturally responsive. So.
Sounds like a plan. Who wants to start? Was that Susan?
what was the date of that? Because I'm going through my notebook to look for my notes. That was
November.
after the last board meeting?
Yeah, that was the 4th.
Okay.
Well, I'll jump in because I have attended many of these over the course of my years as a teacher and board member. And this gentleman, to me, was right on target. And what was especially good, his presentation left you wanting to see where he was going, and it had a trickle down effect that you wanted to keep listening and drinking in what he was saying. So I thought it was very well done, and he certainly was as a keynote speaker.
Anyone else? Joanna?
I loved the student interviews, and I loved that not only did he do them, but that he listened and took suggestions and implemented them. I think that was probably the most refreshing part of everything, is that he was willing to implement the new things that he learned. And that sometimes can be really hard, but he took that really seriously and just really uses a lot of student voice.
Thank you. Alicia and then Peter. Alicia, you're not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, it took me a minute. I think the thing that I really walked away from it with, where he would say after the reflection of the student interview, we had to sit with that they were delivering really hard things to hear. And I just want to remind all of us on the board that he talked about the social change cycle, conflict, self-reflect, policy, and what our responsibility is to hear things that are hard for us to hear, own it, listen to it, sit with that, and figure it out. So that was pretty important to me to walk away with. And then the other thing, oh, sorry, I took lots of notes, I apologize. But we talked about listening to people who are different than you. We talked about nobody else sees you show up in the space if you don't see yourself. How important it is to make sure students of all kinds are represented in our classrooms, on the walls, images, how important words and images are, and that everyone can see themselves in there. Talking about guilt versus responsibility, the importance of shifting from defensiveness to action. It was a really powerful speech. There's not many online trainings that I feel like I could listen longer, and I did feel that way with him. And I don't know, just important to collaborate with others who think differently and who are different than we are.
Thanks, Alicia. Peter?
I thought he was a very good speaker, but I thought he spoke more to teachers than he did to administrators and board members. I thought he gave some very good suggestions on what to do with the students in the classroom. I like the fact that he discussed the problem and he acknowledged the problem without anger and finger pointing. And I thought he did a really good job of not turning people away with his anger. So I thought it was a very, very good talk. I definitely learned something from it.
Peter? Anyone else? Grant?
Yeah, I thought the student focus was valuable. The idea that the board is accountable to the students and the ways in which you can implement that. I think that has some sort of actionable items, that we can put into practice here. And so that was something I took away. And then, the idea that the students really need to see people like themselves in the roles where they can be, in the future. So really it was that student-based approach that I felt was pretty powerful.
Thank you. Anyone else? Susan?
So the first thing I thought of, and I took notes probably halfway through, and then I finally put my pen down because I just needed to listen. And I could have listened for another couple hours. And so some of the first thing that came to mind was the interviews that he had with students and engaging the students in I mean, it's not the whole process, but in the makeup of the school, engaging the students in the makeup of the school. One of the things that kind of hit home for me was the whole academic eligibility that I had never really thought about before until the last couple of meetings. I think Alicia brought it up at one point and I never really thought about it before, about how academic eligibility rules out disadvantaged students, when we all know that students that are part of, so athletic eligibility, students that are involved in sports actually do well academically because of the structure and routine that it provides. And then I also wrote down this whole idea of power hoarding, and hadn't really thought about it before, about how easily it is that people in power can continue to hoard the power.
Thank you. Anyone else? Al?
It would be wonderful if there was some way that we could get him into Maple Run for a workshop for all the teachers. Something to think about.
Yeah, good idea.
I just wanted to bring up one last thing, Milda.
Yes.
It's Susan. And it's also the idea that policies are never intended to be into perpetuity, and that we need to continue to look at policies and to revamp to make sure they're meeting all of our needs and they're intended for everyone.
Yeah, I kind of glommed onto that piece too. I thought he was a very engaging speaker. One of the things that I noted is that we were like 30 minutes late into it. It would be great if we could get a copy of the presentation and a recording of it, because I would have liked to have heard the intro, which I did not get to the whole thing. And I think Bill is trying to get a copy of that. I don't know if the VSBA has made that available yet, but you're going to follow up on that, Bill?
Yes, I realized that right before the board meeting, Milda, so I don't have that.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Could I add a couple of things, Milda, that I took from the presentation? I mean, it's the second or third time that I listened to him speak, so it's always good to hear it again and again.
Okay.
One of the things that I like to have him say, that I've heard him say, is that and he says it quite a bit through his presentations, is he tries to take it from a place of no blame. And there, if you look for some of his YouTube videos that are online and off his website, he actually talks about that was a growth point for him, was to get away from a no blame from the past, but improve the future. And that's it. You know, he really, in his book, I haven't read his book and I want to get a copy of it, but he talks a lot about making the cultural change through positive, strength-based approaches. And I think that's really important to look at as well. Everyone brings strength and to their work. So, and I like, the other thing I like that, it was kind of, Susan, you kind of went here on athletics, but he did talk about in his schools when he got the best improvement and closed the achievement gap was losing the tracking within the school system. There's no prerequisites for courses. And he talks, at least to educators, he talks a lot about that. So.
Thanks, Bill. Alicia?
One thing that I think is really important as we look to have community engagement as a board is that he cautioned us to respond. Your first response, no matter what you hear, is to validate and affirm. It's okay that people are angry. It's okay people are disappointed, and we need to sit with that and accept that and listen to them and validate and affirm their feelings, just like we do when people are happy and express that they're, grateful or things like that. But I just wanted to point that out, that that's an important piece of it, that some of these conversations are going to be uncomfortable.
Thanks, Alicia. Anyone else have anything they'd like to share? Thank you. Moving on. Item 7C is negotiations. We have a meeting scheduled with the negotiating leads for I think it's next week. We can discuss some preliminary planning, but if we were to do that, we would have to have a finding. That preliminary discussion of this in public would put the board at jeopardy, so therefore it would need to be discussed in executive session. So I'm throwing that out there as a possibility that we might want to do some negotiation planning in executive session at the end of this meeting. Are folks agreeable to that, so we can have a plan for our meeting that's coming up? Okay, so I'm going to declare that finding, that if we were to discuss this in public session, it would be putting on the board a significant disadvantage. So we will discuss negotiations in our executive session. Moving on, pardon me, to item 8, new business, budget timeline and process. We have an attachment in our packet, and I think Martha's present to take us through that timeline. So Martha, take it away. You would have to unmute, I think, or turn your mic on or something, because you look like you're unmuted. Not working. Okay, you're muted, you're unmuted. You're not, we can't hear you. Do you have your computer audio on? John, any suggestions for Martha?
Does she have a mic selection under the mic piece on the Zoom?
Do you have a mic selection, Martha, in your
You can choose what you use. It should be just an internal one on your laptop.
Are you staring at your screen? Is there a mic and a camera at the bottom?
That's a good sign. Oh no, it's not a good sign. No, we can't hear you.
No.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
There we go. Sorry.
What was it? What do you think it was? Yeah,
it was just the setting, because I usually have headsets, and I don't have it with me here, so I had to switch it up.
Just trying to learn for future. Thanks, Martha.
I'm always struggling when it comes to technology. So everybody should have a copy of the proposed timeline. I'm going to say proposed because it is a timeline that is dependent on a lot of factors. So the first part is getting the information from the leadership team and pulling together the information for staffing and expenditure purposes. And the goal is to have a first rough draft to the school board, the first meeting in December. Just so you know, a lot of the school administration has been fairly busy with things other than just budget. And so I'm getting the information as quickly as I can, and I do hope to have a rough draft for you by December 1st of the expenditure budget only at that point. And I can read down through every bullet if you want me to, or I can just kind of highlight some of the areas. Once
Why
we
don't you highlight? I think we've all
Okay.
looked at it, so.
Okay. Once we get to have a draft of the expenditure budget, then the main piece is waiting for information from other sources like the Agency of Education, the Commissioner of Taxes to get preliminary yield estimates so that we can start calculating what the education spending would look like, which in turn is what we use to set the tax rate. And those bits and pieces comes in drips and drabs. And in the last couple of years, the information has actually been coming a lot later than normal. I think some might remember that last year, we didn't actually have any finalized equalized pupil counts until after we had adopted the budget, which is one of the pieces that helps us determine somewhat where our tax rate will land. And I think Bill might jump in here a little bit because
As soon as you're done with the timeline, I'll be glad to.
okay. So hopefully we'll have a first draft for you to look at on December 1st. And like I said, it'll have some very preliminary numbers, and numbers will change in that expenditure budget moving forward. Some of the pieces that will some of the pieces that will affect that budget are things that like the 6 semester average for technical center students. That's a piece of information that I need to determine how much of an expense we will have to pay out for vocational tuition for the next year. So those are the pieces, and those don't come until like December 15th. Then we, around the mid-December, first part of January is where we start getting some information regarding revenue sources, what different grants we will be able to access, block grants. And once I start getting more revenue information, then I'm more able to help determine what the education spending level will look like. And that should come right around, hopefully by the first meeting in January, we'll have some fairly decent numbers, with the board having to adopt the final budget no later than the January 19th school board meeting. So it's kind of like a real general overview of the process. Each meeting between now and the end of January, we'll probably have some sort of budget information coming to the board.
Great.
I'll do that admin piece if you're all set. Sounds like you are at that point. One of the things that we talked about in prior board meetings is the shifting number of pupils we have in Maple Run and our total overall equalized pupils. We'll be able to give you an expenditure budget on the 1st. I've asked the principals, and they kind of told me this is a little different than what we've done before. I said, I want you to put everything in your budget you need, not what you think will meet what the board will want to adopt, but what you need. So I expect to come with you with a much higher budget than maybe what you've seen for a percentage in the past. And I'm not naive, but I think it's good for the board to understand what are the needs versus what are we able to fund. And that's especially true this year in COVID, with the number of student needs we're seeing that we're not able to fill. So I am also realistic that the voters of Maple Run need a budget they can afford, and we will get there. But until we have equalized pupils in January, the board will have a hard time to make that decision until you know your revenues and the effects of the common level of appraisal, which could change quite a bit because we all know what's happened to home sales this past year and the way the prices have increased. So I'm warning the board that we may need a meeting in the second week of January for you to in the first meeting in January, get the information and then have a week till you make a decision about what level you want the budget at, vis-a-vis what impact it has on the tax rate. I also understand that statutorily, we have to show the percent increase on an equalized pupil basis. And that may also affect where the board decides to give us direction and where to go for overall Maple Run budget. It's much more complex than past years. I would just want us to all appreciate that because of what we're seeing for equalized pupils, not only here, remember the whole state probably affects our equalized pupils more than our own pupils do, and the changing in the CLA. So we've got a lot of factors that even on a normal year would be very hard for you as a board to have the right information to make the decision. So I thought it was prudent to warn you that we most likely will need a third meeting in January to get there before we have to send this off to get on balance and warn it. Martha, did anything I missed from our discussion about that? Because I said I was the one to deliver that friendly piece of news.
Yeah, no, I think we pretty much covered it, unless anybody had any questions for us.
Any questions for Martha?
Well, it's Martha and Bill, so I know I think I asked this a couple meetings ago. So Bill, if you're asking, oh boy, yeah, you're asking what they need. So I don't know if you've talked with other supers around the state, and they're getting ready for their budgets as well. Are you getting more of an indication that we're going to be hovering around that 3.5 or percentage, or I mean what's
I don't know what people are looking for targets for budgets. I usually use a 3% target for a budget as a rule of thumb, but it's actually, I think, more crucial to look at the percentage change in equalized pupil. It's actually a better place to look.
That's what I thought you were saying.
And that can be different. And you could not change the budget, you could not change the students, and the equalized pupil cost could drastically change up or down. And those are factors outside the control of this board. For those of you who've been on it for many years, you've heard Martha talk and Kevin prior to me talk about these are the factors you have in your control and these are the factors you don't have in your control.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say that. I figured I'd ask.
No, it's always good to ask.
All right. Any other questions related to budget timeline? All right. Thanks for Martha for keeping us honest on that.
Thanks.
Next item on the agenda is item 8B. It's the leave request from Molly Hartman. And I believe we have a brief email in our packet. So I'm going to ask Bill what the administration's recommendation is.
My recommendation is that you grant the leave. I've spoken with her. If you'd like more detail to respect her privacy, I would need an executive session for personnel reasons.
So for those that may not know, Molly Hartman is the music teacher.
Oh, thank you, Nelly. At City School. I'm sorry.
At City School. I guess for discussion, I need a motion to accept the recommendation from administration to grant the leave request for Molly Hartman.
So moved.
Thanks, Al. Is there a second? Thanks.
I'll-
I think Katie beat you all
Okay.
to it.
That's fine.
But thank you. Okay, discussion. Does everybody feel like they have enough information to make a vote, or does anyone need any additional detail in executive session? If you need executive session, can you give me a thumbs up or something? And if I don't see any, I think I'll just take the vote. All right, looks like we're ready to vote on the motion to approve the leave as requested by Molly Hartman and recommended by administration. Jack?
Yes.
Al?
Yes.
Nina?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Joanna?
Yes.
Grant?
Yes.
Alicia?
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Nilda, yes. Okay. She has her leave. Next item on the agenda is item 8C, the governance subcommittee report. And I think Grant, you're going to be giving us that.
Yeah, we have an update for you. Aaron, I think you have some slides. Is that right?
Yeah.
Or maybe John does. There we go. So, all right. Give me one. Okay, good. So we have the board governance committee. We are working on providing some recommendations to the board around governance models and board types. And we've met, I think 2 times now. And so we wanted to share with you some of the progress we've made, some of our key learnings, and maybe the direction that we see this committee moving in the future, and trying to sort of gauge support for where we think this should go, so that we know that we're working in the right direction. Can you go to slide 2, please? So I've broken it out into just a couple of sort of main topics. We have some learning that we've done and that I wanted to bring the board in on. This is, everyone aligning essentially like on vocabulary and, basic concepts. And then I want to move into a little bit around what we think the, some future state options could be. So you can go to slide 3. So, we're using, I don't know, can you guys see me too? We're using this book, Governing for Results. This is sort of a text that we're taking direction from. In this book, one of the first things the author, who is Mel Gill, one of the first things he introduces is the various types of board that exist out in the world. There were 4 of these board types that are sort of pertinent to school boards, at least in our opinion. The first one being a constituent representational board. This is sort of by statute what we are. We're publicly elected. We have a primary responsibility to balance the interests of our constituents against our organization. And because we have this, whatever other board type we want to adopt will have elements of this constituent representational board type. So it's important to keep in mind as we move forward. The other 3 board types that we may want to take elements from in defining sort of how we want to operate would be a traditional board. A lot of us on the governance committee feel this is kind of maybe a current state for us. We oversee operations in sort of a strict sense, like, we're watching what happens, we're providing guidance in a sort of a day-to-day basis. Like with the report we saw today, we took the report, we tried to digest it and give some feedback, but it wasn't really a proactive effort on our part to try to set any sort of criteria around what that report should be. And then we delegate any responsibility to the superintendent for the management, and the work that we do is conducted through committees such as this one. 2 other board types that are pertinent to school boards would be results-based or policy governance boards. In a lot of ways, these are similar, but they're sort of organized differently. The results-based would be, we would tell essentially Bill what we want this district to be, what we want the outcomes to be. And then it would be on him to go out and achieve that and report back to us and demonstrate that is being achieved. And then we would do essentially a performance evaluation type feedback. And then the other kind is policy governance, which I think we've heard the term before at various retreats. And the idea here is that in addition to all the various policies that required to provide per like VSBA, we would have 4 additional sort of main policies that would define the aims of the organization. It would we would have another one for our own governing process. So like the logistics of how we do what we do. We would have another policy to define the limitations on the superintendent. And we would have one more to define the relationship between the board and the superintendent. So how we work together. What kind of defines these, in addition to kind of those broad outline type bullets, is if you go to slide 4. A lot of it comes down to what's your relationship with your superintendent. And this is a table that I took out of the book I showed you, or at least a portion of the table that I took out of the book I showed you. And for each type of board, there is a roles and responsibilities model that goes with it. And you can see, with this constituent representational, you actually have the board doing some of the management type work. And a lot of that, I think, comes from, what you think your responsibilities are to your constituents. And so the board can actually get a little bit, can get heavily involved with the decision-making in the management. One way, to sort of pull up a little bit and really leave that management to the superintendent would be to go more towards one of these results-based or policy governance type boards. And like I said, right now, we may be more of a traditional board where we're doing operations and we're, relatively hands-on in that department. So let's see. I want to pause right there because actually, before I pause, I'll go on to slide 5. Because when you start talking about the, where we get to sort of how we are with this constituent representational board, you have to start talking about that balance between the organization and the constituents. The constituents, is relatively easy to define, right? It's really just the voters for your portion of the district. So like my constituents are town voters, and that's real easy. The question for me is, what is the organization? And, this even goes back maybe a little bit to the, racial equity, seminar we had, just recently, because what is our accountability to say our students, right? They're the organization. The teachers are the organization. The administration is the organization. Non-voting parents and potentially community members, they're the organization, right? So we have commitments here and we have accountability there. And those people are not necessarily our constituents. And so we have to balance that. And the way in which we do that, can really define what kind of board we are. So before I get into, what we think moving forward, I want to stop for a minute because there's a lot there I think that I just went over, the different board types, the different ways that we might relate to the superintendent and these things. And I'll just stop and, see if the board has any questions that they might want to voice now before we move on. I'm hearing none. So we'll go to slide number 6. And so this is what the committee is going to propose. The first proposal is, as I've implied, we want to reconsider the type of board that we are and what our governance model should be. And that leads us to the proposal number 2 is, if we truly do, reconsider, what we are and where we're going, that will probably mean that we want to transition some aspects of what we do as a traditional board over to either results-based or a policy governance type board. And regardless of which one of those we choose, probably the hardest part, all the logistics part of it, the defining, roles and responsibilities of the board or the superintendent, or all that stuff. There are sort of boilerplate policies out there that we can piggyback on and adopt, and that'll be relatively easy. What's going to be hard is actually defining the aims of the district. These are the things that Bill has mentioned previously. Like, what does a BFA diploma mean? What do we want our students to be able to do out in the real world after they graduate? What do we want their experience to be like while they're within our educational system? And that's going to be the hard part, is developing that document, that policy, and that'll take some effort. We have a proposed timeline, and that's on slide 7. On advance. So what we're proposing is that, to start moving down that road, we need to understand the results-based governance better. We need to understand the policy governance better. And then ultimately we need to make a recommendation for our own governance model. And it could be one of those, it could be neither of those, and it could be a combination of those. And so what we'd like to do in December is have a detailed review of the results-based. In January, have a detailed review of the policy governance. And then in February, we'll start to consider some recommendations. And I guess we're looking to find out whether or not the board can support that approach.
That's it for your slideshow, right, Grant?
And that's all I got for slides. Yep.
So we can go back to the.
Joanna?
Thanks for all the work that you guys did on this, first of all. My question would be, would it be possible, Grant, or maybe you even planned on doing this, could you provide some kind of review to the board at the end of December and the end of January, so we can be more familiar and not just have to vote on something, I guess, come February?
Yes, absolutely. So that is the proposal. It is not
Awesome.
for us to
Great.
understand, but for us to bring something to you so that we can all understand.
Right. Okay, great.
Yep. Yep.
Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions? I think it's a great timeline, great proposal. Nice presentation. All good.
All right, we'll keep working on it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is item 9, other business. First item under other business is the warrants. Looking for a motion to approve the warrants, acknowledging that passage of this motion will act as authorization and signature of any individual board members participating remotely.
So moved.
Thanks, Al. Is there a second? Thanks, Susan. We have a motion and a second to approve the warrants. Any discussion needed? Hearing none, I'm going to take a roll vote. Jack,
Yes.
Al,
Yes.
Nina,
Yes.
Susan,
Yes.
Joanna,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Alicia,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
Katie,
Yes.
Nilda, yes. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is the superintendent report. Superintendent.
Thank you. Two things I want to speak to are Veterans Day celebration and Fairfield Center School. So I'll start with the Veterans Day and then I'll get to Fairfield Center School. Then if there are any questions from the board on either of those or anything else, I'll be glad to answer. last Thursday, I really want to thank two individuals, two teachers within our district who do a lot of work to bring together the Veterans Day celebration. And one is John Chaffee, teacher on Team USA at City School, and Eric Bushy, band director at BFA. John, and I want to extend the thanks at City School, not only to John, but the students as well. I met with the students 2 or 3 weeks ago to hear how the students plan and work with our veterans in our community to organize the whole day. They do a terrific job of it. It's great to see that student leadership and putting in that work with our community. Last year, unfortunately, we couldn't have the Veterans Day celebration with everyone at Taylor Park, and this year, because of COVID, we slimmed it down to just a couple of school. BFA and City School were there. Well, we had student speakers from town as well. And we had a lot of good, students had many different roles, whether it was singing the national anthem to speaking about their personal connection. I also want to thank one of our employees, Katie Lamb was the main speaker, the featured speaker for the day, and she did a great job talking about how her family through multiple generations is connected with veterans from served multiple military organizations. Just again, it was a great day. We luckily had great weather for it. I remember 2 years ago standing in Taylor Park with snow flurries and light rain, and so what a difference a day of sunshine makes. And the kids were tremendous and very respectful, and I was just so impressed and glad to be the superintendent and proud to be part of that. So I think it just showed a great student leadership. The second thing, as I know the board's well aware because I did send you some emails updating the board on this, but this week ago, this past Saturday, we unfortunately lost, as a shock to all of us, Brenda Goodhue, who was the administrative assistant at Fairfield Center School. And as people recall throughout the week, she was the glue that really held Fairfield together. And I want to thank the Fairfield staff and really stepping up from Saturday afternoon on and working to help their community go through a grieving process and begin a healing process. My heart goes out to the family, to her family, and I really think of them, but also to the communities of Fairfield, Sheldon, and Enosburg, who are all affected by her passing. I told the staff on Monday afternoon I was just proud to be considered a colleague of theirs. And I want to thank Casey Provost, who has stepped up as our HR director. He's the interim principal right now. We're putting together a process to look at interim principal candidates to go further than December, and I'll update the board more as we're doing that. I'm working with the leadership team at Fairfield Center School to put together that process right now. I also want to thank my colleague to my right, John Muldoon, who said, I have some things going on that week, but I don't have a lot, and just jump right up. So, with all that, we're trying to be respectful of Brenda and her work at Fairfield Center School, but at the same time, holding on the process for the admin.
You're not muted. I think you're still not, oh, you're muted.
Yeah, she's muted. We want to have a process to hire an admin assistant, but we're also trying to be respectful of Brenda and her family. There's an extended family, so we'll be putting that process together in the next couple of weeks as well. Just trying to balance those pieces. So I know that's the conclusion of my superintendent's report at this point.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is board announcements. Any members of the board have any announcements they wish to make?
Nilda, could I just ask why we went remote?
Sure. The large number of cases of COVID in the community, the fact that there's been evidence of group gatherings being places of transmission. the fact that several of us work for employers that have suggested that, being in groups is not a good way to go. And so I called Bill and said that I would like to have this particular meeting today remote, and that we should look at the numbers of COVID cases in the future and handle each meeting on a case-by-case basis.
That's a good leadership decision. Well done.
Thank you. Jack.
Just wanted to commend Grant for his really nice job summarizing our discussion and giving the presentation tonight. That was really good.
Thank you. On behalf of Grant. Anyone else have any board announcements they wish to make? Susan? Nothing tonight. Okay. So moving on, agenda for future items, we have the IT study and the 5-year plan still. Bill has indicated that he's working on the 5-year plan. Obviously, we're going to see budget on every agenda from here on. Sometimes more budget info than other times. And then there was I had a discussion with Bill that perhaps even if we don't get to the whole IT study yet, that maybe we can have a technology update, since our technology guru has done some great work, and it would be beneficial for us to get an update on that. So look for that in the near future. Anyone else have any other items for future meetings?
Yeah, I would just support that, Nilda, especially if when Bill asked principals to give the budgets of what they need, then it would be important for us to know what people, an inventory first, right?
Yeah. Yeah, good comment. Thank you. Any other items for future agendas? Okay, moving on, we do have a topic for executive session. That topic is negotiations. So hearing nothing else on the agenda, I would like to request a motion to go into executive session with the topic being negotiations.
So move.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. As far as discussion, Bill, who do we need at that meeting besides the board?
Myself, and if Martha's still on, I didn't forewarn her, but I think it'd be good to have her. And I'm bringing up my computer so I can move to another room for the executive session, so we can go right into that.
Okay, so it'll
You know
be the board and Martha and Bill, yes?
I'm going to leave, obviously.
Yeah, and Katie also.
I
Okay,
suspect.
all right,
Thank you.
thank you,
Good job
thank
tonight.
you, thank you both. We will excuse people as they move along, and Bill's going to work his magic to get in another room so that we can go into executive session in a minute or two.
Nilda, do we need
Yes.
to vote? Do we need to
Oh,
vote?
thank you so much, vote. Jack,
Yes.
Al,
Yes.
Nina,
Yes.
Susan. Joanna,
Yes.
Grant,
Yes.
Alicia,
Yes.
Peter. Well, we don't need him, and Katie and Nelda, yes. Okay, so we have we're going into executive session. Let me know, Bill, when you're ready.
Yeah.